So, here's the deal. I'm a 29-year-old woman, happily married, or so I thought, and things had been going pretty smoothly in my life. I had a great job, a wonderful home, and a husband who I thought was absolutely loyal to me until everything started to unravel. But let me take you back to the moment it all began. My husband, Steve, is 32. He's one of those charming, well-liked guys who can strike up a conversation with anyone and somehow make them feel like the most important person in the room. I've always admired that about him. People loved him. He was the guy everyone called for advice or to hang out with. It made me proud to be married to someone like him. He was the kind of guy who made me feel safe, secure, and, let's be honest, a little spoiled. We had a pretty good life together. At least, I thought we did. Now, I'm not one to be paranoid. I've always trusted Steve. Maybe too much, to be honest. But lately, there had been this nagging feeling in my gut that something wasn't quite right. He started working late more often, he'd be on his phone a lot when I was around, and whenever I asked about his day, he'd get defensive. Nothing major at first, just small stuff that didn't add up. But then, one night, things took a turn. I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a photo of Steve and a woman I didn't recognize. They were in some upscale restaurant, laughing, leaning in a little too close for my comfort. There was a spark in my stomach, something that hit like a ton of bricks. Who was she? Why didn't I know about her? I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe it was just a friend, right? But when I confronted Steve, he brushed it off so easily. Just a work colleague, he said, his eyes never quite meeting mine. That gut feeling? Yeah, it didn't go away. In fact, it got worse. Then came the text. It was one of those moments where time seems to stand still. It was late, around midnight, and Steve was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, I swear, I wasn't, but his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and that damn notification lit up like a neon sign. I couldn't help myself. I glanced at it. And there it was. A message from someone named Lily with a winking emoji. I miss you, babe. Can't wait to see you again. My heart dropped into my stomach. That wasn't just a work colleague. No, that was something else entirely. And it wasn't just some innocent flirtation, it was an affair. I felt my anger rising, but I shoved it down. I couldn't let myself blow up without knowing the full story. So, I waited. I watched. And over the next few days, I found out more, way more than I ever wanted to know. Steve wasn't just seeing her in secret. No, this was a full-on relationship. They'd been seeing each other for months. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was clear. He had been lying to my face, deceiving me, while I'd been playing the oblivious, loving wife. The worst part? He didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. I had to find it out on my own. I was furious. I was crushed. But above all, I was determined to do something about it. I couldn't just let him waltz around like everything was normal, like I was going to sit there and let him tear apart everything we'd built. I had to take control. And that's exactly what I did. The breaking point came one afternoon when Steve came home from work earlier than usual. I had been waiting for him. And in my hand, I held the most shocking revelation of all, the text messages, the photos, the proof that he had been cheating for months. When I confronted him, he was caught completely off guard. He tried to deny it at first, but it was clear he knew the jig was up. I demanded answers. But the worst part wasn't even what he said, it was what happened next. That's when it got real. Steve was still trying to talk his way out of it when my phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't a message from him, but from Lily. I hadn't even saved her number, but there it was, her name flashing on the screen. She knew. And she wasn't just going to sit quietly. Are you done with him yet? Because I'm planning to move in next week. You better not make this harder than it needs to be, the message said. My blood ran cold. She was moving in? In our home? The one that I had worked so hard for? The one that we had built together? I was not going to let that happen. Not now, not ever. So, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them take what was mine. I called Steve out on his lie right then and there. And then, things took a turn. The night was just beginning, and everything was about to change. So, you can imagine the fury boiling inside me when I read that message from Lily. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything, the betrayal, the lies, the audacity of her thinking she could just waltz into our life like nothing had happened. But this wasn't going to be some quiet, tear-filled conversation with Steve. Oh no, I was done with that. The way I saw it, the moment Lily sent that message, she signed her own eviction notice. Moving in? Over my dead body. I locked eyes with Steve. He could tell I was about to snap. His face twisted from confusion to panic. He started stammering, trying to explain things away, but I wasn't listening anymore. I wasn't hearing any of it. I wasn't even looking at him as he tried to spit out some nonsense about how complicated everything was, about how it wasn't what it seemed. Right. Because when you're having an affair, it's never what it seems, is it? I stood up, and for the first time, I didn't care how much it hurt him. He deserved this. I grabbed my phone and hit dial. It rang twice, and then I heard her voice. Hey, babe, I was just thinking about you. Can't wait to. I didn't let her finish. Listen, I don't know who the hell you think you are, but you are not moving into my house. You have no right to even be in the same city as me. There was a pause, just a beat. Then, she laughed. Oh, sweetie, you really think you have a choice? Steve told me everything. He's leading you. He's with me now. Get used to it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall, but I stayed calm, too calm. I could feel the storm building inside me. Well, Lily, here's the thing. You don't get to take my life from me. You don't get to walk into my home like you own it. She laughed again, like this was some joke. But I wasn't laughing. And Steve? I asked. Does he know you're making plans behind his back like this? Because he sure as hell doesn't know you're telling me all this. That hit her. I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Well, I mean, he said things were complicated, she mumbled, clearly not expecting that level of pushback. Complicated? I scoffed. I'll show you complicated. And without another word, I hung up. Turning to Steve, I was met with his wide-eyed expression, a mix of shock and realization. He could see I wasn't backing down. But the look on his face. Oh, that look. I can't even describe it. It was like he realized, all of a sudden, that maybe I wasn't just some doormat to walk all over. Maybe I wasn't as easy to control as he thought. He took a step toward me, his voice softer now. Honey, calm down. Let's talk about this. Talk about what? I shot back. The fact that you've been lying to me for months? The fact that you thought you could just invite this woman into our home without so much as a conversation with me? He froze, and for a second, I could almost see the wheels turning in his head. He was trying to come up with something, anything, to make it better. But there was no saving this. I held up my hand, cutting him off. No. I'm done talking. You've already said everything you needed to say with your actions. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Steve looked like he was about to argue, but I wasn't having it. Get out, I said, my voice colder than ice. You and your girlfriend can leave. For good. There was a long silence as he processed what I just said. Then he blinked, and it was like something inside him snapped. What? You're kicking me out? I didn't flinch. No. I'm locking the doors. You can figure it out. He started to pace, frustration building in his every step. You can't do this. You can't just... I can. And I am. Steve's expression twisted into something darker, something I hadn't seen before. It was anger, pure and simple, and I knew that I had just pushed him to his breaking point. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I walked over to the front door and locked it. His eyes widened as he saw what I was doing. You're really doing this? You're locking me out? Not just you, I shot back, walking over to the other door and doing the same. Her too. For a split second, I saw panic flash across his face. But then it turned into something worse, entitlement. Like he still thought he could control the situation, that somehow I'd cave, that I'd back down. But I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to let him waltz back into my life like nothing happened. I was done being the wife who waits for the apology that never comes. You're going to regret this, he said, his voice low and menacing. But I didn't blink. I already regret trusting you. But I'll live with that. His frustration turned to disbelief, like he couldn't wrap his head around what was happening. And honestly, neither could I. I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me anymore. He wasn't the husband I married. He was a stranger, someone I didn't know, and I wasn't going to let him take another step inside my life. I stood there, hands on my hips, watching him. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. And that's when I knew this was it. There was no going back. Things were about to get a whole lot worse. The silence that followed Steve's angry outburst felt like it was suffocating us both. He stood there by the door, hands clenched into fists, his chest heaving with frustration. I knew he was trying to figure out his next move, like he had any power left in this situation. But I wasn't giving him an inch. Do you really think this is going to work? He finally spat, his voice tinged with disbelief. You think locking me out is going to make everything better? You think I'm just going to let you control this? I let out a small, humorless laugh. Control? Oh, honey, I've been letting you control everything for far too long. But not anymore. You've had your turn. His face twisted. You're really going to do this? You think you can just kick me out and that'll fix things? You think I'm going to just walk away from everything we've built? Everything you've built, I corrected him, my voice as cold as the ice building in my veins. This was never my idea. You think I built this life for us just to have it stolen by you and your mistress? I took a step back, letting the words hang between us. I wasn't looking for sympathy, and I sure as hell wasn't going to back down. I'm done listening to your excuses, Steve, I said, my tone as sharp as glass. You chose her. You chose this life. And now you get to live with it. His hands started shaking, but not with fear. It was anger, pure rage. I had never seen him like this before, not in all the years we'd been together. The man I married had always been calm, rational, cool-headed. But the person standing in front of me now was someone I didn't recognize. Someone who thought he could still manipulate me. He took a step toward me. You know I'm not going anywhere, right? You think I'm just going to walk away and let you get away with this? I raised an eyebrow. I'm not the one who's been lying, Steve. I'm not the one who's been cheating on my spouse for months. You don't get to talk to me like you're the victim here. He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. And you, I shot at him, you're not welcome here. You don't get to come into my home, try to tear everything down, and then pretend like you're the wrong party. I could see it in his eyes now, the realization that this wasn't going to be a quick fight. He wasn't going to walk out of here with his tail between his legs and everything still intact. I had locked him out, but it wasn't just about the door. It was about power. It was about the control I had over my own life, my own home. Something he thought he could take from me. Steve, I'm not interested in hearing any more of your lies. You're not going to manipulate me into letting you back in. Not this time, I said, taking another step back, just to make it clear I wasn't afraid of whatever tantrum he was about to throw. He threw up his hands in exasperation. This is crazy. You're really going to just kick me out, like it's that easy? I'm your husband, for God's sake. I glanced over at the hallway, where our pictures hung. The pictures that used to remind me of the life we were building together, the love we had for each other. Now they just felt like ghosts of a life that no longer existed. You're not my husband anymore, Steve, I said softly, though it felt like a weight had just lifted from my chest. You haven't been for a long time. He froze, and for a moment, I thought maybe something had clicked inside his brain. Maybe he'd finally realized what he'd lost. But the look on his face told me otherwise. He wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Well, this isn't over, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. But I could see it. The doubt in his eyes. He wasn't sure if he was even going to come out of this alive, figuratively speaking. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. Yeah? Well, it's over for me, Steve. And I'm not going to make this easy for you. You can't just waltz back into my life and act like nothing happened. His eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. You know, this isn't just my mess, right? Lily's coming, and when she does... I don't care what Lily does, I cut him off. You're not welcome here. She's not welcome here. So, what are you going to do about it? The silence that followed was heavy. It felt like 100 tons of pressure, and I could feel the weight of every moment we'd spent together, all the decisions that had led us to this point. It felt like everything had been building to this. There was no more avoiding it. No more pretending. Steve turned away from me, his back stiff with frustration. I'll fix this. You'll see. I'll fix everything. I watched him go to the door, but just before he opened it, he turned back to face me one last time. You don't know what you're doing, do you? You're making a huge mistake. I shrugged, not even bothering to look up. No, Steve. The mistake was thinking I'd let you get away with it. And with that, he left. For a moment, I stood there in the empty house, feeling the tension slowly release. But I knew this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. I could feel the storm brewing. This was just the beginning. The next day, everything felt heavier. Like the calm before a storm that was just waiting to break. I hadn't heard from Steve or Lily all morning. My phone sat silently on the counter, taunting me with its quiet. I knew they were probably plotting their next move. But I wasn't going to sit around like I had been before. I had made my decision. And I was ready to follow through, no matter what. Around noon, the knock on the door came. I stood still, holding my breath, trying not to let the adrenaline that shot through me show on my face. It was the kind of knock that made your skin prickle, the kind that tells you something's coming. Something big. I went to the door, slowly, every step measured. I knew who it was. It had to be. I opened it. And there they were. Steve, standing there, looking like he'd just walked out of a scene from a bad movie, disheveled, eyes red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept. And then there was Lily, standing next to him, her face plastered with that "I'm so confident I can do whatever I want" look. I could almost feel the smugness radiating off her. She was trying to look all tough, but I could see the cracks in her confidence. She knew this wasn't a good idea. But she was here anyway. I stood there for a second, my arms crossed, just looking at them. I wasn't going to let them see me sweat. Not after everything they'd put me through. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to sugarcoat it. Steve opened his mouth, but Lily cut him off before he could say anything. "We're here to talk, okay? I just think it's time we work something out." I raised an eyebrow, trying not to laugh at her audacity. "Work something out?" I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "You're the one who's been trying to move in. You've already made your intentions pretty clear." Lily blinked, surprised at my directness. She wasn't used to people standing up to her. I could tell she expected me to fall apart, maybe beg her to leave Steve. But that wasn't happening. "Not now." "I'm not backing down," I said, my voice firm, cold. "This is my home. And you, both of you, have no right to be here." Steve opened his mouth again, his face a mix of frustration and desperation. "Listen, I'm trying to be reasonable here. We can work this out. Just let me back in, and we'll figure things out." I leaned in closer to him, narrowing my eyes. "No, Steve. You don't get to come back in here. Not after everything. Not after the lies, the cheating, and the audacity to think I'd just let you walk right back into my life." For a second, it looked like he might get angry, but then something in his expression shifted. He wasn't angry anymore. He was scared. Really scared. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice suddenly quiet. I stepped back from the door and turned around, leaving it wide open. Without saying a word, I walked straight to the hallway and grabbed my keys off the counter. I could hear their footsteps behind me, the tension in the air thick, like something was about to snap. And that's when I did it. I pressed the button to lock the front door. The sound of the deadbolts sliding into place echoed through the house, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something shift in Steve's eyes. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was realization. But it was there, and it was unmistakable. I had taken control. And he had no choice but to accept it. Lily's voice broke the silence. "What the hell are you doing?" I turned to face her. "I'm locking you out. Both of you." She scoffed, clearly expecting me to back down. "You can't just..." "Watch me," I cut her off, my voice sharp as a knife. "You're not welcome here. And neither is he. You can't just waltz in and take everything you want. You don't get to just move in here like this is your home, because it's not." Steve moved a step forward, but I raised my hand, stopping him in his tracks. "If you really think I'm going to let you back in here, after everything you've done," I shook my head. "You're not the victim here, Steve. You don't get to decide anything anymore." The two of them stood there, frozen. I could see the anger building up in Steve's face. But this time, it wasn't the anger of someone who thought they had control. This was the anger of someone who realized they had lost. Lily wasn't backing down either. "You're making a huge mistake," she spat, her eyes flashing. "Steve's going to come back to me. You'll see. He'll choose me over you." I shook my head, finally letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You're delusional if you think that's going to happen. It's over, Lily. You lost. And so did he." I could see Steve's jaw tighten, his fists clenching. But something inside me knew that this was it. This was the moment I took back my power. This was when I stopped being the doormat, the wife who sat around waiting for apologies that never came. "Now," I said, taking one last look at them both, "get out of my house. And don't come back." They didn't say another word. Not a single sound as they turned and left, walking out the door like they were afraid if they stayed too long, something worse might happen. And with that, the door shut behind them. I let out a breath, feeling the weight in my chest slowly start to lift. It wasn't over yet, but it sure felt like I'd just taken the first step toward getting my life back. I don't know what I expected after locking them out. I guess part of me thought I'd feel a rush of victory, a sense of relief, like everything was falling into place. But the truth? It wasn't as simple as that. The silence in the house was deafening, and for the first time in days, I had to face the reality of what had just happened. Steve and Lily were gone, yes. But the damage wasn't magically erased with one locked door. I still had a lot to process. The lies, the betrayal, the heartache, it wasn't just going to disappear. And as much as I'd like to say I felt empowered and free, the truth was that I was exhausted. Physically and emotionally drained. I had just kicked my husband out. I had just chosen myself over the person I thought I'd grow old with. I sat down on the couch, my hands shaking slightly as I stared at the empty door. The house felt different. It wasn't the home I remembered. Not yet, anyway. But I knew it could be. I knew it had the potential to be a space where I could rebuild. Slowly, but surely. The next few days were a blur. I spent the first one in a kind of numb haze, going through the motions but not really feeling anything. I didn't even answer my phone at first. Not to Steve, not to anyone. It felt like the world had just kept moving without me, and I was left behind trying to catch my breath. Eventually, Steve reached out. He started texting, calling, sending messages through mutual friends, hoping to get through to me. But every time I picked up my phone, I just put it down again. I wasn't ready. And honestly, I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to hear him apologize. I didn't think his apology would change anything, and it certainly wasn't going to make me forget the months of lies. It wasn't going to erase the fact that he had betrayed me in the worst way possible. One evening, about a week after everything had gone down, I finally decided to take the plunge. I was sitting on the balcony, watching the sunset, trying to breathe through the tension in my chest, when my phone rang again. It was Steve. For a second, I hesitated. But then I answered it. Hello? Honey, please. I'm so sorry. I'm begging you to listen to me. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. I had been expecting this, but hearing his voice still made my stomach churn. I'm listening, I said, my voice as even as I could manage. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear him shifting, probably unsure of what to say next. I was stupid, he finally admitted, the words sounding almost like they hurt him to say. I messed up. I hurt you. And I know I can't fix it. But I'm asking for a chance. A real one. I'm sorry for everything. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, feeling the weight of them. A part of me wanted to believe him. Wanted to go back to the person I thought he was. But the other part of me? The stronger part? Knew that his actions couldn't be erased with a simple apology. Steve, I said, my voice softer now, I know you're sorry. But I need more than that. I needed honesty. I needed you to be someone I could trust. And right now, I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way. He was quiet, and I could tell that what I said hit him hard. Good. Maybe that's what he needed to understand. That there was no magic fix for what he'd done. That he couldn't just undo the pain he caused with a few heartfelt words. I can't give you that right now, I continued. I don't know if I ever will. But I do know one thing, I'm better off without you in my life. Right now, I need to focus on myself. I expected him to argue, to plead for more time, to promise change. But he didn't. He just let it go. "I understand," he said, and it sounded like the words cost him everything. "I'll leave you alone. You deserve better." I closed my eyes, not sure if I was relieved or angry. Maybe both. Maybe I didn't need to hear it. Maybe I just needed him to leave me alone, like he said. After the conversation, something shifted in me. I felt lighter. Not because I was finally free of Steve, but because I had taken control. I had made the hard decision to stand up for myself. And that was something I could hold on to. The next few months weren't easy. The aftermath of betrayal never is. But I learned how to live without him, how to breathe without the weight of that relationship pulling me down. I threw myself into work, into friends, into rediscovering who I was outside of the marriage that had defined me for so long. And little by little, the pieces started to fall back into place. I started to realize that it wasn't just about locking them out of my house. It was about locking them out of my life. It was about reclaiming my power and deciding that I would be the one to write the next chapter of my story. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were days when I missed the comfort of having someone to rely on, someone to share my life with. But then I'd remember why I did what I did, why I couldn't let Steve back in. And I'd find the strength to keep going. In the end, locking them both out wasn't just an act of defiance. It was an act of self-love. A decision to stop letting someone else dictate my worth. I wasn't going to be the person who waited around for apologies that never came. I wasn't going to let my life revolve around someone who couldn't even show me basic respect. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is let go of someone you thought was your everything. But once you do, you realize you were always enough on your own.